All right, we have more changes unfolding in select northeastern towns. Changes that have the state of Massachusetts beginning curfews and lockdowns for all residents on October 1st, only weeks before November 7th. What the hell is happening here? How much more obvious do they have to be? And if you look at the order closely, they try and pass this off as voluntary. But when you read the small print, folks, it doesn't sound voluntary at all, not to me at least. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel. And consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So in early 2020, you may remember what they told us. We need to take radical steps, invoke emergency orders, they said, to flatten the curve, telling us these emergency orders will be temporary, 6 weeks at the most. Well, what happened? 6 weeks turned into 3 months. 3 months turned into 6 months. And some cities in California and Illinois even continued with the policy on and off for years. Continuing with the lockdowns for years. Once you give an inch to these people, they'll take a mile, closing our businesses, purposefully shutting down the U.S. economy, creating the fiscal disaster that we're all living through right now, arresting people who felt like taking their kids to the park or visit the beach. Anthony Fauci became a sort of liberal icon in the process with some form of, Stockholm syndrome or something. Liberals went as far as sticking yard signs outside their house with Fauci's face on them. Imagine that, putting your jailer's face outside your house with the words, "We love Anthony Fauci." Imagine that, thanking the person who forced you to close down your business or stopped you from sending your child to attend class, going as far as posting his face outside your home. Can you say North Korea, people? Well, it looks like it may be starting again, this time with something called triple E, Eastern Equine Encephalitis. Check this out. Northeastern towns issue voluntary lockdown to prevent spread of potentially deadly mosquito-borne disease triple E, published yesterday. And remember what this says, voluntary. They made sure to write voluntary, but when you keep reading, you quickly learn it's not really voluntary, not exactly. Check this out. 4 Massachusetts towns, Douglas, Oxford, Sutton, Webster, have enacted a voluntary evening lockdown in an attempt to curb the spread. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Of a potentially deadly mosquito-borne disease. The decision comes after the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, the DPH, confirmed the first human case of Eastern Equine Encephalitis, triple E, since 2020 in Worcester County. On Wednesday, the Oxford Board of Health voted to support the recommendation for people to remain indoors after 6 p.m., effective immediately through September 30th, according to a public health advisory shared with Fox News Digital. So the Oxford Board of Health gets to vote and decide if you're allowed to leave your house or not. Not you. You don't get a vote. Then, starting on October 1st, the recommendation is to remain indoors after 5 p.m. until the first hard frost. Well, call me crazy, but when does the first hard frost start? Early voting starts in October, not to mention the timing of all this. When do people go to the polls, folks? They usually go after work, after 5 p.m. But if there's a curfew that starts at 5 p.m., what does that mean? Also, not surprisingly, you know who this will affect, the party who chooses to vote in person. We saw in 2019 the majority of mail-in votes came from Democrats. Republicans wanted to drive to the polls, vote in person. Now you may be saying, wait a minute, they're saying this is voluntary. What's the big deal? Well, let's keep reading. Let's read the small print of their lockdown order. The period from dusk through dawn is considered peak mosquito hours, the notice stated. The advisory designates the 4 communities as critical risk. It's the Board of Health's responsibility to protect the public health, and we take triple E very seriously, and we are strongly encouraging residents to follow these recommendations due to the severity of triple E and the fact that it is now in our community. We want to educate our residents about triple E and the seriousness of the illness and make them aware of the risk, the statement continued. And here's the important part. Listen to this. However, if they want to use town fields outside these recommendations, they will have to show proof of insurance and sign an indemnification form. Okay, so it's not really voluntary at all to use town fields, presumably go on government property, city property. You have to show proof of insurance. Well, let's ask the obvious question. Where do you go to cast your ballot? Is that not often on city property, a town field maybe? So what exactly is this, folks? What is Triple E? Well, take a look, watch.
Tonight, the Mass Department of Public Health has announced the first human case of West Nile virus and the first animal case of Triple E in the state this year. A 40-year-old man was exposed to West Nile virus in Hampden County, and a horse was diagnosed with Triple E across the state in Plymouth. West Nile virus is typically transmitted to humans through the bite of an infected mosquito. There were 6 human cases of West Nile virus last year. As for Triple E, it's a rare but potentially fatal disease that's also generally spread through the bite of an infected mosquito. 12 people contracted the virus last year. 6 of them died. No human cases of Triple E have been detected so far this year.
So why are they ordering lockdowns when only one person has been affected? They even say here only a few cases reported in the U.S. each year, most in the eastern and Gulf Coast states, they say on the CDC website. So you're going to order possibly millions of people to stay in their homes when only a few people a year are even affected by this. Why issue the lockdowns now? Why weren't there lockdowns last year? Why this year? Why 1 month before the election do they decide to do this? And don't forget, once you give these people an inch, they'll take a mile. Remember what Fauci said after promising 6 weeks to slow the spread? Well, 4 months later, after promising that, he said this.
If back to normal means acting like there never was a coronavirus problem, I don't think that's going to happen until we do have a situation where you can completely protect the population. If you want to get to pre-coronavirus, that might not ever happen in the sense of the fact that the threat is there.
And I'll hand it to them. The Cove doesn't seem to be scary enough to get people to pay attention, but something like this, Triple E, sure steps it up a notch. The New York Post writes this: rare, deadly equine disease spreads in New York and can jump to humans via mosquitoes. Eastern equine encephalitis can be transmitted to humans, killing about 30% of people afflicted, has been spotted in several Hudson Valley counties and surrounding states. That's upstate New York, towards upstate New York. An elderly Massachusetts man was recently infected and has killed a horse in Orange County, according to health officials. Triple E is spread from horses to people through mosquitoes. Those who survive commonly develop ongoing neurological issues, according to the Centers for Disease Control. Coma and seizures are also possible. And here's the important part. There's no vax to prevent or medicines to treat Eastern equine encephalitis, the agency warns. Now, is it just me, or does this strike you as eerily similar to what happened in 2020? A novel illness suddenly pops up, there's no treatments available, no vax, just like we saw 4 years ago, except this time we're only 2 months away from November. And what bothers me about this, Triple E isn't spread person to person like the Cove was. So if you do get it, there's no risk of spreading it like there was with the Cove. Look here, Triple E is only spread to humans through the bite of an infected mosquito. Triple E is not spread person to person, people to animals, or animals to people. So then what right does the government have to do this? Stop you from going on town fields without insurance? Stop you from leaving your house without insurance? It's my decision if I choose to take that risk. Not a 4-person board who gets to vote on my mobility. Now, so far, it's only Massachusetts who's begun these lockdowns and scheduled additional lockdowns on October 1st. New York apparently hasn't done so yet. They say the high-risk areas are the Hudson Valley up into northern New York. I'd like to see them, by the way, try and tell residents in upstate New York to lock down. See how well that goes. And what's also concerning is that New York may very well be in play this year. There's been whispers around D.C. that Donald Trump has a chance to flip the state. Could Donald Trump flip New York red? Lee Zeldin won't rule it out. And again, upstate New York is Trump country. So look, this new Triple E may be very serious, but telling me to lock down, issuing a curfew and a lockdown order, haven't they learned from their mistakes? What I want you to do as my government is educate me. That's it. Let me know what's going on, but stay the hell out of my business. And never, ever try to do what you did to us 4 years ago. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.